For this exercise, we're going to be practicing some different techniques in Photoshop that'll help you convey the idea of mood within your composition. Now, in the final product that we're working towards, there's no one result. Instead, I'm going to be showing you a variety of different techniques, and your results are going to look different from mine. But just know that in showing you these techniques, I'm really playing around to see what kind of results that I am going to get. Sometimes there'll be things that I like, and sometimes there'll be things that maybe I don't need to use. It depends on your design and what you want to do. And so if yours looks different from mine, that's totally okay. We're going to start off this exercise in class by randomly assigning you a mood that you will have to convey in a composition. Now, if you're following in class, this will be randomly given to you, so you'll draw one of these moods down at the bottom and keep it secret and don't show anybody else. If you're following along just from your own home, randomly pick one on your own, and that'll be the mood that we try to convey from this exercise. The second thing you have to do is we're going to use 3 and only 3 images for your overall composition. The first image will be given to you. You absolutely must use this image. And if you go to the Moodle page, there's a folder of Iron Designer images that you'll pick and choose from. So you'll be randomly assigned one of these photographs from this folder. I've got pictures of angels and birds, some different textures, some buildings and doors, flowers, all random different things, but you must use one of those. For this exercise, I'm going to choose maybe this flower as my first image to work from. The second image we're going to pull from is any of the images from the folder that you want to choose. So in addition to the one that you must use, go through and find maybe another photo that would best fit your mood or your style, or maybe some ideas that you come up with. For me, I'm going to pick the skull as my second one. Let's do this second skull. I like that one. The final third image can be any photograph that you find online or draw yourself. And so if I've chosen the mood of like anger, so anger is very deep. I can picture reds, I can picture action lines and angles, but I've been assigned this flower. Hey, this flower doesn't necessarily fit the idea of anger. Now I know I can definitely pull something from the skull to work with, but let's see if I can find another image that would help me out to convey anger. If I do a Google image search, let's go to images.google.com. The first thing to know is that you may want to find some good appropriate ones that have some good color schemes to them. Let's say I wanted something like a red landscape. So now I've got, good deep dark reds. Maybe I can even further refine this as saying, let's do fire landscape. And that'll give me something that's even more rageful or interesting with that. But I don't want to just choose any random image. I want to find some good ones that I can work in. The first thing I would do is go to Tools, choose your size, and set it to be large images. This will filter out any of the small pictures that you may not necessarily be able to use within your design. Other things you can look up are like body parts or seasons or other instruments. What I don't want to do is to look up something if I had anger like a person fighting. That's going to be way too easy to convey a mood because definitely there's some anger or aggression within that. I want to be a little bit more subtle. I don't want to just show a person being angry. I want to be able to convey anger through the other images that I have. So I'm going to back up. I like those red landscapes. I'm going to use this kind of as my starting point. This one is pretty cool. It's got a nice little dark red landscape. It's got more of a sci-fi kind of feel to it. Definitely I've got some trees and some really nice textures from this one. Let's go back up to my tools and make sure I've got it as large sizes. Usually if I look at the size of an image and it's over 1,000 pixels, that's a good image to be able to work from. Just to challenge myself, I'm going to set these trees, or at least a selection of trees, as my anger landscape. I like this. So let's go with this. Right click it, save the link or save the image as. Make sure it's on my desktop, and this will be my third image to work from. Another common question that I get has to do with copyright and being able to use these within our design. Now, since we're only using this for educational purposes and we're creating our own design from them, we're deriving a design from existing images, this is okay to use for copyright and to put into your portfolio. However, if I was being hired for this, or if I was doing this for another client to be used elsewhere, I would never want to just randomly pull images from the internet. Instead, I would want to take my own or do my own drawings, create my own content. But for the purposes of education, this is going to be a good starting point just to learn the techniques that we'll be working through. So to get started making our composition, I'm going to jump into Photoshop. We'll go up to File, down to New, and just create a new document. Now the size of this document for this exercise won't really matter. So I'm just going to give it a good starting size. We'll set our units of measure to inches of 8 by 10. Do make sure you're working in a high resolution, 300 or better, and I can keep my RGB color mode and a white background. We'll say Create. Once this is created, if you ever need to quickly and easily change the size of your document, and you want to either not type in a specific size, just kind of be more fluid with it, one of the first things you can do is go up to Image, down to Image Rotation, and this will allow you to change your rotation of your overall canvas from landscape to portrait or back otherwise. Also, you can use your crop tool. With the crop tool selected, up at the very top, make sure the ratio is turned off. So I'm going to clear those away. This will allow me to click on any of the edges and be able to change up the size or dimensions of the area that I'm working in. Now that I've got a good size and setup, let's start placing each of the images within our design. To place an image, you can go up to File and down to Place Embedded. We can find these images. I've saved mine to the desktop. Let's do Date Modified. Open up that skull first. So there's a skull. Remember, whenever you place something, it's going to have its own layer, and if you ever see the X going through it, we can hit our Return key to submit any changes or any transformations we want to do with that. A faster way of importing some images is simply to find where they're at and drag them into your Photoshop document. Again, hit your Return key to lock in that, and then finally let's do the red landscape and place that one in there. So I've got all three of my images onto my design, and you can see they each have their own individual layers. For now, I'm going to turn off visibility for each of the layers, and let's give my background a good starting color or texture or something to work from that I can place all my images on top of. To fill in an area of solid color or even a gradation or a pattern, go up to Layer at the top, down to New Fill Layer, and this will allow you to fill it in with any kind of color that you want. I prefer using gradients, so I'm going to choose Gradient. It'll ask you to give it a name. I'm just going to say OK. And this will open up the options. Automatically, you can see it has its own gradient layer, and here's all the options between this one. You can change up the style, being linear, radial, angular, diamond, whatever fits best for you. I love using the angled one because now I can click on it and I can actually move the starting and stopping point around this one. Additionally, I can change the angle of it. If you want to change the style of gradient, you've got some predefined ones. So there's this here. All different colors, all different styles. That's actually kind of cool in itself. Or if you want to do your own custom one, click on the gradient slider itself, and this will pull up your gradient picker, and then you can edit this gradient the way you would any other gradient in the other Adobe software. For mine, maybe instead of having a darker purple, let's pull this into some dark blue, and instead of this nice orange, we'll go more into a reddish spectrum. Now I do want to convey the idea of anger, and I'm giving myself kind of some interesting little color choices. Maybe instead of a dark, so much of a purple blue, maybe we will go back to the purple and make it a dark purple. Yeah, that's good for that one. We'll say OK to that. Again, since it's its own layer, anytime I need to make a change to this gradient, I don't like the colors or the position, all I have to do is double click on that, brings up the options, and it gives me the ability to continue editing this. And so this has a little bit of an advantage versus just using the fill bucket tool or even the paintbrush tool to quickly fill in the areas that you have. So the first thing I've got is a nice background to place all my stuff into, and that's going to give me some good starting colors. The second thing I need to do is to look at my images and see how I can enhance those. Let's go to my layers, and I'll turn on visibility for my skull that I have. A common thing students want to be able to do is to remove any white or solid areas around an object, especially if it's isolated like this. There's a couple of things you can do to do this. The best way of doing it is choose one of your selection tools. In my case, I'm going to use the Quick Selection tool, and select the area that you want to keep. So I'm going to quickly and easily drag over the skull, making sure all parts of it are nice and selected. And I am aware there's different ways of doing this, but this is the way I kind of like to work through it. So there's that there. Once you've got it selected, simply go to your Layers panel, click once on the Layer Mask, and that'll mask off everything else that's around it. Remember, with the Layer Mask, you can choose your paintbrush tool, and anywhere you choose to paint black into here, that will add on to the design that you have. Oops, let's go back into normal mode, hit cancel. There we go, and grab my brush. Anywhere I paint black onto here, that will automatically start to add on to my part that I have. Of course, depending on the brush that you're using, it may be a little bit easier than what I'm doing for this. But if I wanted to work inside of that little area, that's doable as well. Another way of doing it, let's back up, put this back, is to simply erase away the white area. Now there is a tool, you've got an eraser tool, but there's a better one called the Magic Eraser tool. And with this one, this will look for common or similar colors. In my case, since the white area is all common, this would be a great time to use this particular tool. However, if I go to click on it, you'll see that there's a little error on there saying, hey, I can't exactly erase it. The reason for this is because the layer I'm working on is a Smart Object layer. If I click once, it's going to give me that little error. It's going to ask me to rasterize it. We'll say OK. And now you can see I've lost the little icon and it's a regular layer now. So one click on the white area quickly and easily gets rid of that white. Let's do the same for inside of the skull. One click inside of the nose, and you can see how it quickly and easily picks up on some of the white areas, but maybe not all of them. So this is where you may want to swap over to your regular eraser tool. That works like a regular brush, and you can get exactly the spots that you want to keep or not keep. The downside to that method is, of course, you're erasing away your pixels, so you can't undo what you've just done. In my case, this actually works out okay. Going back to my layers, let's turn on the flower layer. Since it's on top, naturally it's covering up what's underneath. I could isolate this flower by itself, but let's see what happens when I change up my blending modes. With that layer selected, working through each one of these is going to give me some different results. For instance, if I choose multiply or any one within this group, it's going to get rid of my lighter colors, and you can see how it shows through the image below. That's actually kind of cool. It gives me a nice little effect, and it darkens out the areas that are around it. If I choose the next set, that's going to choose and keep the lighter colors. You can see how it will blend out some of the darker colors that are around this area. So that may be an effect that you want to go with. Overlay and soft light tends to work with your midtones. So sometimes it'll keep the lighter or darker depending on what's below it. Of course, difference will give you the opposite, and that's a really fun, interesting effect. And then hue, saturation, and luminosity will deal with the colors or how saturated they are. Any one of these will easily give you some idea that you may not know what kind of results you're going to get. This one's actually really interesting. I love the way the skull is starting to show through from this particular flower. Maybe it's a little bit intense, so I can drop down the opacity and actually have the skull show through. That's really, really interesting right there. I like the look of that. That's something that I would want to keep. So for now, I'm going to keep that on there because that's the direction that I'm heading to if I'm wanting to create anger. If I turn on my other layer, let's do the rainforest. Now with the rainforest, again, we can make this larger. If you need to quickly and easily select things on your screen, make sure Auto Select is turned on. This way I can click on different parts of my image and it automatically picks those parts. Also, if you turn on Show Transform Controls with your Move tool selected, this will add the bounding box and let it be easier to resize and change things up on the fly. I like the way this looks. I know if I change the blending mode, it'll start blending with those below. Maybe I don't want that to happen. Let's drag this down, and I'm going to let the forest be more of the background. Again, that's giving me some really cool results. There it is, lightened up. Color dodging, give me this result. So nice dark deep reds. Vivid light, give me something like that. I love those textures. Tell you what, let's go back to my flower layer. I want to be able to keep my flower, but let's get rid of that darker background that's around it. So I'm going to turn off all the other ones so I can just see my flower. Maybe we'll go back to normal mode. Bring up the opacity. Again, I'm going to choose my selection tool. Quickly and easily select my flower. With my flower selected, turn on my layer mask. Now I've got it done. Uh-oh, didn't get the center part. Let's go back and add on that center part. Now when I turn on that, got that selected. Here's another great tip to work from. So I've got my flower selected. If I didn't like the color of this flower, let's say instead of it being purple, I want it to be more of a blue or a green. There's a couple of different ways we can change up its color. To do this, I'm going to open up my Adjustments panel. The Adjustments panel works along with your Properties panel. Whenever you add an adjustment to it, for instance, I'm going to do something for the, let's say, gradient map. Gradient map allows you to map out a gradation of colors or values. Right now, I'm going to swap this over to something like this. So if I chose gradient map and had the red to green, you can see how all the darker colors turn green, lighter colors turn green, and the darker colors turn really, really red. And so it's a great way to quickly colorize what you have. However, if I only want to apply that to my flower, I've got an issue. Every time you add an adjustment layer, it affects only the layers that are below it. So if I want it to only affect my flower, I need to choose my gradient adjustment and turn on a clipping mask. Let's go up to Layer and choose Create Clipping Mask. Notice now in your Layers panel, you got the little arrow pointing down to it. That means it's only going to affect that one layer. And that's what I want to be able to do. From here, now I've got my different colored stuff. I can change up the blending mode for it. Let's set that back to be overlay, or even hard light, or whatever it was that I was working with. I like that hard light. That's giving me really good, interesting results with that. So now I can make this larger, and I can keep the skull set for that one as well. The final thing I can do is if I need to add more colors or change up the placement of colors or move things around, this is what I'm going to be playing around with to get the results that I want. Let's change up the size of everything, make that a little bit larger. Let's change up the color of the skull as well. So for my skull, I'm going to choose my skull layer. I'll choose maybe this time the hue and saturation adjustment. With hue and saturation, I can click and drag and very quickly and easily change up the colors, remember, of everything that's below it. So it's not going to affect my flower that's on top. If I only want to affect my skull, that's where we select it, go to Layer and turn on your clipping mask, and now just my skull color is going to get changed up as well. I've got green. Maybe I want to shift it more to the reddish side. That's looking pretty good. Maybe even for my flower, we'll change up these colors as well. Getting me different effects, different styles. Sometimes they'll give you things that you like, but all I'm doing is playing around to see what's going to happen with it. Maybe instead of the purples, let's go back to the bright yellows, the dark yellows. Almost wanting to go for a flame kind of effect, and that's giving a really cool kind of bluish flame. Hey, that's kind of cool. Yeah. I accidentally created a clipping mask within the skull itself. What happens if I was to multiply that towards the background? Meh, can't see it. Color dodging gives it, ooh, that's kind of a spooky little effect with that right there. I'm actually kind of liking the look of some of these. I'm not necessarily getting any closer to being anger or rage, and so I need to back off what's happening. Remember, the final effect that you have, ooh, there's a spooky one, is you're trying to convey the essence of a mood. And so if I'm looking at this, as cool as this looks like a great little album cover. If I'm not getting the essence of rage or the essence of the design, I need to find something else. The other thing you can do, don't think that you have to have just the 3 images. You can make a copy of it. I love the way that this is looking, but I want to still see my skull, so I'm going to make a copy of my skull layer. In order to do this, drag your layer down to New Layer. You can see how it automatically makes a copy of that. Now in doing that, I lost all of my gradients, so let's quickly go back in and reapply those into there. Now I've got my skull. It's doing pin light on top of it. I can see it pretty good. Super duper spooky. Oh man, now there's something that's really spooky as well. A final thing you can do is play around with some of the filters that are at the very top. So for instance, if I go up to Filter, down to my filter gallery, I had the top skull layer selected, and I can play around with some artistic effects that may go into it. Or I can even play around with some of these sketch kind of stylization effects. Any one of these may give me some results that I may or may not like, but we'll go along with it. Graphic pen is always cool, or I love the halftone pattern because this gives it more of a graphic bite. We'll say OK to this. And there's that particular setting set on hard mix. If I did screen, it'll give me something that looks like this. Difference will give me that kind of look. Again, all I'm doing is playing around just to see the kind of effect that I want to go for. If I find something that I like that's really giving me the idea of rage or ooh, that's unexpected. All I had to do was move my flower out of that. Let's keep that. Let's go with that one. Maybe place my flower, let's place it back below the skull. And I don't like necessarily the color of that, but it's definitely something I can work with. It's the blues that's really showing up. I want to affect that blue, so I don't want that to be there. Maybe if I set that to be, difference is giving me the opposite. This is simply the stage where I'm playing around with it, trying to think out my process, just so you can follow along. All that's doing is adding more bite to it, and I'm not necessarily picking up any other colors. Let's see, the skull is on top. Meh. There's linear light. Drop the opacity on that. I want it to have more of a bite to it, so I love hard mix. Or maybe I can scale this down. What happens if I set it over the eyes? Ooh, even that offset. That was kind of cool. I accidentally set it to that. We'll come back to that one. I really don't like the blue. The blue is the direction I don't want to go in for those eyes, but I love the effect that's going on with this. Maybe I can go back in. Let's do a channel mixer. In channel mixer, I can tweak the colors within a setting. So I can make the blue more or less intense, or I can nudge it one way or the other. In my case, let's take the blue channels, drop those down, and let's play around now with the let's go back to gradient map. I always love using gradient map simply because it gives me the most control over exactly what I have. The other advantage of using gradient map, let's say I chose something like this. I can even change up the blending mode for those channels. So now if I set that to multiply, boom, I've got something that works within this. Color burn, screen, lighten, overlay, any one of these will give me some different kind of results within this. Here's hue. Hue gets pretty close to the kind of color I think should be in there. Hard mix is a little bit too hard. Ooh, definitely vivid light's too hard. Maybe I can try a different color. Let's see what else we can pull from it. I don't know. Maybe I'm even starting to like the blue that is there. You can see the blue is actually happening on this bottom skull. So maybe down here, this is where I need to change it up. There's where that blue is. Let's see what happens if I change this one up. I bet I can force it to be purple or too red, too white if it goes that way. Again, I have no idea what's going to happen, but we're just going to keep it like that. Maybe it wasn't that. Maybe that was because it's doing the pin light. It's doing the opposite. So let's see what happens if I change up this one. Oh, that's kind of cool in itself. Has to have a flower in it. What happens if that flower took over where the eyeballs were? So if I set that to be there and made a copy of it, not too angry. So let's drag it back up to here. I don't know, I like that half of it, so maybe I'm going to grab my paintbrush tool. Let's paint off the other half. Have fun with this. This doesn't have to be anything serious. It doesn't have to be anything that you're going to keep or show anybody else. But until you get the mood that you want, the idea that you want, that's what we want to be able to go with. You know what? I think just hard mix. We'll leave that in there as a subtle texture. It's subtle, but it's there. And let's do another color difference. Hue and saturation. In this case, I'm not necessarily using a... There we go. Oh yeah, that's the stuff. Really change it out. Boom. Now we're starting to break up that eye. Man, all that happened simply because I chose to play around with the idea of it. Awesome. I'm going to call this anger. Again, I've used all three of these. I've played around with the adjustments. I've played around with how the images blend together, how the adjustments blend with it. I've cut out images. I've created clipping masks and layer masks. I've played around with some of the different filters at the top. I've tried to create an illustration using all the full range of tools that Photoshop has to create this. The ultimate thing I want to do is to convey that emotion that's been given. In my case, anger, darkness. Now, if I got another emotion that's a little bit lighter, something like love or serenity or peacefulness, that's obviously going to have a totally different look and feel that I'm going for. For this one tends to fit pretty cool, and I like that. The last part of this exercise, if you're in class, we're going to save up what you have. We're going to walk around and see if others in class are able to figure out what your emotion is. If you're not in class and you just want to be able to submit this, first we do need to save this up. So let's go to File and do a regular save. I'm going to keep it as a Photoshop file. I'm just going to call this Iron Designer Photoshop file. But to submit it to Moodle, go back up to File and Save As one more time. And we're going to change the format to a regular JPEG. Saving mine to the desktop. If it asks for the options, just make sure it's a large, high-quality file and say OK to that. That JPEG is what you're going to upload to Moodle once you get finished. All right, bye-bye.